Thanks, Dr. Lowery, for joining for an interview, talking about your role working with us, vision screenings, the spot devices, and kind of the criteria and some of the our data that you looked at and other studies. Basically, I just kind of wanted to start by asking you about your role at Pacific University and with us at the Oregon Lions, and then kind of let you take away the presentation that you've got. And if anything else pops out to me, I'll jump in with some specific questions. But it sounds like it's great.
Okay. Well, thanks, Matt. Yeah. So I've been teaching at Pacific University College of Optometry for, gosh, I don't know, 20 some odd years. And have also, spent my career doing mostly pediatrics and pediatric low vision. So, and involved as well in outreach and particularly vision screening, and have been providing consultation to the Sight and Hearing Foundation for the screening program for about the same amount of time. I think it was about late 90s when I started helping out with the old screening program. So I was pretty excited when when the photo screeners came into production, the digital photo screeners, because that now gives us a chance to really automate the process of screening and making it much more efficient, and also capturing kids that need to be detected, kids who have vision problems. And it does it objectively, which is the really nice thing. Because as we know, those of us who have been involved doing vision screenings with visual acuity charts, that can be very time consuming, and it's sometimes difficult to get children to respond to those things, especially the young ones, the kindergarten and first graders. And so having an objective way of measuring their eyes and actually detecting vision conditions is a really nice way to go. So let me just take you through a few things to explain what a good vision screening should detect, because there's key conditions we're looking for. We're looking for strabismus, which is an eye misalignment, an eye turn in or out or up. We're looking for significant optical errors of the eye, especially farsightedness or hyperopia and astigmatism, because those are the conditions that tend to cause the most difficulty with learning. We also want to detect myopia as well, which is nearsightedness, like myself and a lot of us. However, we know myopia is also associated with better than average school performance. And it's interestingly, that's the one thing that distance eye charts will reliably detect. However, that's the least important thing to detect when we're talking about evaluating children's vision.
So we certainly want to know if kids can't see the blackboard or they can't see outdoors to play sports, but the factors that you look at suggest that not being able to see the blackboard is like less important than the ability to read or astigmatism, which both astigmatism and hyperopia come into play with.
Exactly. Hyperopia and astigmatism affect near point vision function, which then makes it much more difficult for those kids to acquire good reading skills and to sustain their near point work for long periods of time, because what happens is they tend to get symptoms after 15, 20 minutes. They tend to feel like their eyes are bothering them. And then kids, they don't even know that their eyes are bad. These are little kids that never known anything different. So to them, they just think, oh, don't everybody's eyes get tired after reading for a while? Or do they just, doesn't everybody see double occasionally? They don't know that that's not normal.
Right.
And so that's why it's so important for us to get in and screen these kids as early as possible. And then the other big condition, which is associated with everything else, is amblyopia. And that's typically when one eye is weaker than the other early in childhood, either because of an eye turn or if it's just optically weaker. That eye will kind of be left out of the wiring of the brain because the brain tends to ignore the eye. And so many of the other conditions we're looking for will lead to amblyopia. And so that's, even though we're not directly detecting amblyopia, because that's really a visual acuity deficit, we are finding the conditions that are underlying amblyopia. And so that's the important thing.
Right. And because the impact of this condition, if not treated, is so severe where you can lose sight and other things, my assumption is, and its prevalence, because it's, you know, quite a few percentage of kids. That's why a lot of the national organizations are so, and I don't know, what I'd say, like ophthalmology also like so concentrated on really trying to identify kids as early as absolutely possible, even before we start screening them in the schools. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, that's why the photo screeners like the Spot were developed typically early for originally for evaluating preschoolers who are nonverbal or not able to participate in a kind of a regular eye chart screening. And so when we took the Spot and started using it for school age kids, we didn't really have any research on, well, is it really going to give us what we want for kids who are at school age? Because this thing was designed for preschoolers. So that's kind of been one of the issues we've been looking at pretty carefully.
Awesome.
So just some thoughts on vision screening in general. We have to remember the vision screening is only a screening. It's not 100% accurate. Even a comprehensive eye exam by an eye doctor is not 100% accurate, but a good screening should detect 80 to 90% of the conditions that it's designed to detect without too many false positives or false referrals. And the other thing that's really important, I think, for our screeners to think about is that a screening is only appropriate for children who have no suspected vision problems. If a child comes into the screening event and has an eye turn or a red eye or says, my eyes hurt, they should be failed automatically, even if they pass the Spot screening. And that's important because the Spot doesn't detect everything. And there are things that occur with children that, we need to be aware of, and kids can have symptoms for other things that the Spot doesn't detect. So,
well, and as you talk about, the spots are both, there's like this objectiveness of the spots, and then sort of consistency of data reporting, where everything that goes into the spots we take out of the Spot and we report on. But here are these things you're talking about that we can't really report on, and it can be a little tricky because this is where, I mean, only in the sense that data you're collecting in a certain way could be subjective. But we always say, if our staff members see anything, or if teachers are seeing anything and they're mentioning it to us, it's, if you see it's like if you see something, say something. It's like, if you see something going on, they need to go get checked out. Don't be fooled by if they can pass our screening. At least tell somebody so we can try to see what else might be going on, if anything.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, if the kid already has signs of vision problems, regardless of what the Spot says, they've already failed the screening before you even start. And we used to, when we did the visual acuity screening, we used to have like a kind of an ABCs where we asked a few questions at the very beginning. And if they came up positive, it was like, okay, you fail, you're moving on. It's pretty much, we're not even going to bother to check because we still did. But bottom line is, we don't want to miss kids with problems, and especially kids with developmental disabilities and kids with learning disabilities. Those kids, particularly ones with developmental disabilities, the prevalence of vision problems is so high that it really doesn't make much sense for them to even have screenings. They should just have comprehensive eye exams on a regular basis. And so bottom line is, we don't want to miss critical conditions. That does a disservice to the kids. So if there is, when we're in that screening environment, and even kids who might pass the Spot, if a kid says, well, my eye really hurts, or I'm having problems of any kind, then they should just get a comprehensive eye exam. Okay. So the Spot, well, why did we choose the Spot? Well, it's a digital camera connected to a computerized system that basically measures all these things that a doctor typically would measure in an eye exam, but very quickly and accurately. It's basically an autorefractor that we would use in a practice setting. And it's pretty darn effective for detecting the things that it's supposed to. The only thing we know, where its big weakness is that it tends to underestimate hyperopia or farsightedness. And I'll talk more about that in just a minute. So like I said, it gives us really useful information. It tells us this is the data that actually we get if we want to look at, if a doctor looked at the data, this is tremendously useful. It tells us exactly what the power is of each eye, the optical errors. This kid has a lot of astigmatism in the right eye, and the kid also has an eye turn that's both inward and downward in the right eye. And actually, this was a little 1.5 to 2-year-old who was very, very uncooperative in our office. And the only thing I could get that day was a spot. And because of that, I was able to start treatment right away. Otherwise, it would have been, well, we think there's a problem. Let's have him back in a few months when he might be more cooperative. But because of this, I was able to actually start treatment. And now he's got 20/20 acuity in that right eye, which if we hadn't caught this early, he would never have developed good vision. So that's really what the spot is for. It's just it's a pretty useful instrument. So that's why Pacific now uses it, even though we do a more comprehensive vision screening when we screen Forest Grove and Cornelia schools, because I have a team of students that go out and do acuities and all kinds of other tests. We still run the spot on every kid, and it's a really nice, useful piece of the puzzle.
Excellent.
And so, yeah, I don't need to go through all these pieces. So yeah, this kid would have had amblyopia in the right eye, but we prevented that. So the question is, as we got into this, was, okay, are we really going to catch the kids who are most at risk? And so we've looked at refining the spot criteria further, because we looked at the failure rate for specific conditions in different populations across the state and compared that to what we know is like normal for the population. And it turns out that different kids, different ethnicities have different eye conditions that are more prevalent. And so we can use the data on these big, huge epidemiology studies to compare to what we're getting in Oregon. And that helps us see that, oh gosh, we're doing good here, but we seem to be off on this one area, which is really hyperopia. And the second thing we did is we wanted to know, hey, is there a relationship between children who fail screenings and academic performance? And so we were able to get third grade test scores from on kids who in one big district in Oregon and compare that to our screening findings. And that gave us some really useful information that I'll share here in a minute. Anyway, all this allows us to prioritize those kids who need us most. And that's really what we want to do, because in any given year, there's about 500,000 kids in Oregon's public schools, maybe a little bit more. And at most, we've been able to screen about 180,000 on our most prolific years back a few years ago. So, yeah. We looked at the yield from the screening back in, I think we started doing this about 2015-16, and we noticed that it seemed to be picking up kids pretty well. A lot of kids with astigmatism and the other conditions that you'd expect, but where it was really low was hyperopia. We would expect, given the criteria we had, that the percentage of children who fail for hyperopia would be at least twice that. It was only about, 0.8%. Actually, it should be more like 4 or 5%. So we realized, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, so yeah, so this was our Lions screening data from 2016 to 17. Yeah. And you're looking at, and the default criteria in the spots is sort of set to a level that you're kind of looking at in a pediatric setting, and you have this national data also that kind of backs up what percentage of kids across the nation really have hyperopia, and we're noticing this disconnect between our data and what the spot device is telling us versus this national data, and we were initially referring like less than half of the kids that the national data tells you than the number of kids that have hyperopia, actually. So we weren't catching them, basically.
Exactly. We're not detecting all the little kids with hyperopia who really need to be detected.
And then you also, I don't know what time frame, but somewhere in this time frame or within a couple of years of this, you were also then reading white papers, research that was being done elsewhere that was suggesting that photo screeners started to see that when we started with the spot devices, there wasn't a lot of data, as you mentioned, but somewhere along this path, along with looking at our data and the national trends, then this research also started that led to some white papers that suggested that all the photo screeners are not good at detecting hyperopia. So I guess those are the pieces of data that we're pulling together, right?
And in terms of, hyperopia has been the age-old challenge for screening, whether you're using an acuity chart or any other type of screening. It's most difficult to capture the kids with hyperopia.
Okay.
And that's because kids with hyperopia can compensate for a short period of time. They use their very robust focusing system of their eye. And even though their eye is weak, they can focus using the internal focusing system of the eye and clear their vision. But there's a cost to that process. It can cause eye strain. It can cause the eyes to actually turn in. And typically, we know those kids tend to not like doing near work because, well, if any of us out there who are in our, say, 40s and 50s, we know what it's like when our near vision starts to go and you start to kind of try to back off and everything's getting a teeny bit blurry and you think, God, I think I need some reading glasses. Well, that's the little hyperope. They have the same problem, except they have this really ample accommodative, this focusing system, but they're using a bigger proportion of it. And so it makes it so they have to work a lot harder than the average kid. And it's also associated with lots of other problems. That's the other thing. So anyway, bottom line is we wanted to increase the yield and capture those kids with hyperopia. So what we did is we lowered the criteria first to 1.75, which increased it a little bit, but then we lowered it most recently to 1.5 diopters, and now we're getting about 2%. And I think when we look at the data this year, we're going to find that it might even be a little bit higher. So the pandemic definitely, with all the near point work and the online stuff, it definitely helped kind of drive the hyperopes out of hiding. Because
that's true, I imagine.
We're seeing so many kids coming into the clinic in the last 2 years who have eye strain and problems with near vision that probably wouldn't have had if they were in a regular classroom setting.
That makes sense. Yeah, it will be really interesting to analyze this past year's data. Yeah. So yeah, we started, I think the default criteria in the spot was that hyperopia is set to 2.5. And then several years back, maybe 5 or 6 years, then we lowered that by 3/4 to 1.75. And then we watched that for a year or two. And then we made another small adjustment to bring it down to 1.5, where we're at today. So just to try to, to try to capture more kids that we know that have hyperopia, but that focusing system can kind of basically like trick the camera, they can accommodate for it long enough sort of to get through the screening. And then on the other side, that's why we're being cautious as we do this, because if we lower it too much, then we start over referring kids, and we want to be modest with that, basically, right?
Exactly. And now we have research that's been published not too long ago that tells us that we probably could lower it even further. We could probably go down to 1.25 or a diopter even and still not increase the false positives too much. And once I show you the other data, I think we may want to just it might be worth it to have more false positives so we capture every little kid with farsighted with hyperopia that we can, because that just showing you that's where we were, and now we're at 2%. So let me take you through just very quickly. We started looking at kind of overall academic performance in schools versus the percentage of children that fail school screenings. And school performance on state tests is published every year, so we can easily get that off the Oregon Department of Education website. And so this is just a regression showing the correlation between the percentage of children who fail screenings at every school in the state that we screen versus the school performance on math and English tests in 3rd grade. And as we can see, there is definitely a trend. It's not a huge, robust trend. And it's certainly not as big of a trend as we see when we compare school performance, the test performance versus the percentage of children who qualify for free reduced lunch, which is a really good measure of socioeconomics, basically. We know that where there's more poverty, there's more children struggling with learning. But we also know that those same children are more likely to have a higher load of vision problems. So that's an important kind of piece that we need to think about. And the nice thing about our screening is we cover the whole state, and we go everywhere, and we go to the poorest districts, and we also will serve the wealthier districts just as equally. So, but so then we took then we said, gosh, it'd be really nice to have individual student test scores and compare that to their screening results. So we did that. The Salem's Kaiser district was chosen because it's a large district with 43 elementary schools, and all that data for their academics is all collected by one person, which made sharing of that data really fairly easy, with Matt helping out. So we wanted to look at specific reasons for failure and then see which ones seem to be correlated with the most academic challenges. And this is just showing the screening yield across the state. Again, astigmatism is the number one reason why kids fail. And particularly in the district that we were looking at, there's a large proportion of children who are Hispanic, and we know that Hispanic children tend to have a higher percentage or a higher likelihood of astigmatism and a higher amount of astigmatism. And so that's seems to be why we in Oregon seem to have a higher percentage of children who fail for astigmatism.
Interesting.
Yeah, so those kids already have language barriers. Some of them are coming from homes where they speak Spanish only until they get into school, and they go into ESL classrooms, typically in kindergarten and first grade. And then if they also have astigmatism and or hyperopia, it's another barrier for those kids to for their academic performance. So this is kind of a snapshot showing what we found across the 2 years of data that we compared. We compared the children who pass versus fail the screening as a whole, and the children who fail score about 10% lower on both English and math state tests. And this is third grade only. Although we see that same relationship in other grades, but third grade is kind of a benchmark grade, and they have all third graders take the tests. And so that was kind of eye-opening, because when you look at, school districts are really excited when they get their test scores up 2, 3, 4%. And here we're seeing a difference of about 10% between children who pass and fail the vision screening. And so that's a pretty big difference. And then when we looked at the individual conditions that are associated with, performance, we see that the kids with hyperopia, those are the little farsighted kids, and the kids with astigmatism are the ones who score the lowest on the state tests. Wow. And so this isn't super surprising, because it matches kind of the previous research on these things. But it's good to see that we are indeed, going after the right kids, and at least trying to capture the right kids. And particularly underscores the importance of catching those kids with hyperopia, because their test scores are more in the 15 to 20% lower range compared to children who pass. And you can see children who are nearsighted, myopia, they score about the same. And it turns out if the myopia is combined with astigmatism, though, it drops way off. So myopia, like I said, that just gives you blurry distance vision, and so you can't see the board as well, but you could participate in doing your homework and reading and all these more lengthy near point activities. Myopes are actually set. and very comfortable. So that's why they tend to do a little bit better in school. At least their vision doesn't interfere with their learning as much as children who have hyperopia, who have more problems at near, and children with astigmatism who have blurry vision at all distances.
Got it.
Anyway, so in conclusion, the spot's doing a pretty good job detecting most of the vision problems that we'd look for in school. And there's a good correlation between these vision problems and academic performance, especially astigmatism and hyperopia.
Got it. And
we also know there's really a strong relationship between uncorrected vision problems and poverty. And so, as a public health program, our screening program is, getting to those kids who most need vision correction. And we'll continue to optimize our criteria as we move forward and looking at different ways to improve the vision screening so that we can meet the needs of these kids.
It's incredible. Thanks for all that.